Okay, I think we are set up to go. I appreciate everyone's patience on this and getting the technology worked out on it. Again, the meeting is being streamed through Zoom as well as YouTube for the public view. The link for the video will be available on our Munds Barn website. Members of the public can also submit any of your comments to the Gmail site, mundsparkbarn@gmail.com. Bud Alter will have to join us a little bit later. He had some work conflicts that required his time until 10:30, so he'll be joining us a little later. To help us today with the selection of the potential location, we've heard from Public Works, we've heard from Forest Service, plus from the Munds Park community. Today we'll complete what I'll call the background information gathering by hearing from various public benefits and safety enhancements for Public Works, which will be brought to us from the various county agencies. Now, I've got to let you know up front here, I just received, just before our meeting here, received a call from Lieutenant Beck that he will not be able to join us. And he was hoping to have someone else in his place, but they're going to have to pass on it for today because they just received a call that Forest Lakes has a fire down there and they need all the sheriff deputies and all to help with evacuation activities that are going on at this time. So want to make sure you're aware of that, what's going on. So let's go ahead and start out with the public benefits and safety, I call it presentations, but it's just information sharing with us, starting out with Chief Josh from the Pinewood Fire District. Josh, appreciate it.
If I may, Josh, I just wanted to give a quick update on that fire. It's actually below the rim, and there's no threat currently to Forest Lakes, but they've got everybody on standby in case it were to come up the rim. So he's definitely engaged in that whole effort right now. They did evacuate that area, which is, there really aren't any homes in that area. It's forested area. They evacuated to get people out who are doing dispersed camping. But so just so everybody's aware, Forest Lakes is not an immediate threat and they are not in an evacuation state either. So thank you.
Okay, I appreciate the update on that, Lucinda.
Morning, everybody. I'll just get started. I want to give you guys just a little bit of background and then talk about current issues surrounding snow removal in the park. So I've been here. I've been with the Pinewood Fire Department for about 17 years, a little over. And when I started here for about the first, I would say 5-6 years, all the snow removal equipment used to be stored on our back lot. It was actually country club property, but where the skate park is currently located at the back of the fire station is where the county used to keep their snow removal equipment. So it used to be right smack dead center in the middle of the community. There was no housing there. There's no weather protection for that equipment. It was just parked outside. But it has been in the park before. When they changed that into a skate park, it then got moved down south. And that's the big issue, is moving that equipment across the highway. So that's kind of the history. It's been here before. It is down at the ADOT lot now. But as far as our response and the effect on the community, I think people do, the full-time people realize that we, on average, get multiple feet of snow. The last few years have been kind of a little off, but we've had up to 10 feet of snow some years. We obviously rely on the county to clear all of those roads. We have provisions for ourselves in case just nothing's happening, we still have to respond. So basically the point is, you know, the fire district itself has invested some money into a small pickup truck, an F-250 with a brand new plow on it, to get us to where we need to go in the event of emergency. But all of that, if there's been no county snow plowing done, it is going to affect our response times. If we have to use our own plow, that takes away from our staffing. That might be on the engine and takes one person at least and puts them on that plow and takes them kind of out of service. So the big thing I would say is, you know, the fire district is still going to operate and do what we need to do to complete our mission objectives for whatever the type of incident may be. But the big takeaway I want to give you guys is that it does affect response time. And it could be a matter of 2 minutes change, or it could be a matter of up to 20-minute change, depending on the snow conditions. We've converted our whole fleet. Our big Type 1 engine is what we call it, is 4-wheel drive and has been for years. So that's been a big benefit. But before that, it was 2-wheel drive. Plowing was much more necessary. So we've made some improvements in the district, in the fire district, to deal with the snow removal issues. But regardless of what we do, the fact remains that if snow removal is delayed on the county's end, it could delay our response times to our community. And that's what we're really talking about. The highway, we respond to that, and that is what it is. That's a whole different animal. But here in the community, our taxpayers, that's the whole reason for the fire district's existence, is the community of Munds Park. And those inside of that community, those are the people who are going to see delays in response times in the event of delay in snow removal. So I really don't have a whole lot else other than that. I did attempt to reach out to some other chiefs and other fire districts around the northern Arizona that have equipment barns, one of which is dealing with the fire right now, Chief Rodriguez in Forest Lake. So I didn't get any replies back from those guys. They're pretty busy as far as benefits or anything that they may see. So I don't have any outside new revolutionary information from them. Just going off my own experience is basically what I wanted to relay to you guys. We will always complete our mission objectives for any different type of call. But again, we're talking about possible delays in response. So that's kind of where we're at. Does anybody have any questions for me?
I do, Chief. So about when was it that the equipment was stored behind the fire department? How many years ago?
So I started in 2003 and it was stored there, I would say, until at least about 2008 or 2009. And Lucinda may have a better idea on that, but that'd be my recollection, is about 2009 is when it was moved.
So there's been maybe 10 years or more that there wasn't the equipment stored somewhere immediately in the park?
That's correct.
Let me.
I can appreciate the response time conversation, but during that 10-year period, were there any times when the response time was delayed significantly? And I'm sure you have some criteria that you try to achieve for response time.
Yeah.
Like we do at the fire department where I currently work now, they have criteria that they achieve. They want to make sure they have a 4-minute response time to every single address in their response area. Has the response time been delayed so much that there have been some real issues throughout those 10 years?
Yeah, so in 10 years, I could probably count on just my hands the number of times that's been an issue. But when it is an issue, I can think of 2 different times. We lost an ambulance that went into a ditch because of snow. So that ambulance was out of service, got to get another ambulance out here. If our second ambulance is occupied, then that ambulance came from Guardian in town. So that's an extremely delayed response for medics. Another one I would say about 6 years ago, we had our first out engine go off the road. The 4-wheel drive still went off the road. And that engine had some damage. So that engine was out of service for, I want to say, almost 6 weeks, which is a significant hit to us. So it happens. It's probably once every 3 years that we have a big event like that, to where we lose a unit. Fortunately, in all of those instances, no one was injured, but our equipment was damaged and it was taken out of service, not just for a day or two, but for weeks or even months in some cases. Does that answer your question, Walt?
Yes, it does. Thank you, Chief.
Yeah, you bet.
Carl, I think Carl's in a position probably to answer the question about what's happened in the last 10 years, because there was a period, right, Carl, that we stored at the sanitary district as well.
That's right. After the fire department, we went to the sanitary district, and we were there about maybe 5 years, maybe as much as 5 years. And then they needed that area that we were in. So we kind of got bumped from there. And so we've been at the Little Antelope Yard, I'd say about 5 years now that we've been out of the subdivision. I don't know that there's been any major events since we've been down there. Like you said, that it does happen once every 3 or 4 years anyway, that you have those major, super major storms, but we haven't had them in the last few years for sure. So anyway, that's where it's at. We've been down south about 4 or 5 years at least.
Good. Thank you, Carl. Does anybody else have any other questions for me?
Okay, thank you, Chief. I appreciate your time
Yeah,
and
you bet.
meeting with us. Next, as I mentioned earlier, Lieutenant Beck in the Sheriff's Department is tied up in Forest Lakes. So I have from the Flagstaff School District, Transportation Director Patrick Fleming. Patrick, appreciate joining us today.
Yep, sorry, I thought I could just unmute. So are you looking for feedback from the school district regarding use of equipment out in Munds Park? Or, I mean, I'm in support of it, obviously, because it keeps the equipment in better condition when you have a barn. I don't know what feedback you're looking for other than that.
What we were looking at, just like Josh did, is any experiences that you may have had out there within the Munds Park, the value of having the timely service for snow removal, and where the suggestion was having yourself in is that some of the residents expressed concern with the school buses in a timely fashion out there being able to get their kids to school.
Sure. And our experience from the school bus perspective or from the school district perspective is we don't use chains on our buses. So after about 2 to 3 inches of snow, we do begin to have difficulty getting up the roads. Munds Park is very hilly, and there definitely some segments that can be a little challenging, especially on Pinewood Boulevard going all the way up the hill. We do go up to up in the area around Fox and Stallion. That is kind of a steep climb. So if it's not completely clear, that's definitely a challenge for us. Going up Crestline is also a challenge because that's the general direction that we run our routes. So when the roads aren't cleared timely, we do pick up down at the post office, which means that all those residents and students are driving and braving the hazards to get down there so that we can pick them up at a central location.
And that, from my own perspective, I heard that from several parents with that concern of timely clearing the roads. Otherwise, they have to drive down to the post office, so they're taking the risks. But questions from any of the other committee members relative to the Flagstaff School District and transportation?
Hi, Patrick. This is Gail. I'm just wondering, have, in the past, I know when my niece and nephew were living in Munds and attending Flag. Hello? I have no idea what's going on.
Someone's phone going? There we go.
And oh dear.
It looks like we had everyone else on mute, so we should be okay.
Okay, I've lost my video, but you can still hear me, I'm assuming. Can you hear me or not?
We could hear you and we could see you.
Oh, okay, cool. Okay, I'm just wondering when, I know my niece and nephew when they were younger, and the school bus was coming down one time and they stopped in Kachina Village first, and there was an issue with roads there. And the bus ended up sliding, and if the parents ended up having to go and get their children anyways. Has anything like that ever happened in Munds Park with the bus sliding and getting stuck in different areas?
I'm trying to think of a time that it might have happened in Munds Park. Honestly, I believe the road crews are pretty good in Munds Park. It's the county crews. The times that we have the most difficulty are kind of between plowing and cindering. So obviously too many cinders can make it slippery, but also, plowing off that unpacked snow can make it slippery. But like I said, I can't think of a time that we've had that happen. Recently, I know that we have had issues in Kachina and in Munds Park in the not too distant past. And of course, once we have difficulties there, we do end up with difficulties getting down to Munds Park. The county and the district have been working together on an alternative bus stop in Kachina Village that they've been working on forever. That's finally been approved and moving forward. And it still is us not going up the hills that are steep and slippery, but it is an alternate location that we're doing at Kachina. So it doesn't necessarily address the clearing of the roads. It essentially takes that out of the equation for us in that particular location.
Okay. Thank
Patrick, is it not typical though that if there's a significant amount of snowfall or even a moderate snowfall, that there's a school day where they would call off school for the day, maybe 6 inches or so?
So we have, a couple of different criteria for that. One criteria is, what does the forecast actually look like? So, there can be an eighth or a quarter of an inch of snow on the ground, but we're expecting a significant amount more. And that's always taken into consideration as far as, can we safely pick up students at the time it's time to pick up students? So we kind of do two different approaches. We're on the road by 2 o'clock in the morning, checking the roads. By about 3 or slightly after, I'll be in Munds Park checking the roads. And we know that, half an hour or an hour, it could be vastly different by the time we get down there. As far as what the weather looks like, how much more snow has fallen, that kind of thing. So we take all those things into consideration. And one thing we try not to do is, if we have a delay, we try not to pick students up at an alternate site, because delays typically mean that parents are already gone to work and are unable to take their students to an alternate stop. So we end up with fewer students who are able to make it to school on those particular days. So if we call school as far as no school for the day, then that'll be typically a 6 inch or better snowfall, or really slippery, really cold conditions. If we call a delay, we want to be able to actually go to the stops so that we're not putting additional inconveniences on the families where we're asking them to come to an alternate stop in that particular circumstance.
Do you know how many students there are in Munds Park? How many kids that take advantage of the transportation?
Um,
I
there,
realize right now it's a little different, but
yeah, right now I'm not transporting any. There's probably 20 to 30, and there are some who take advantage every day, and some take advantage maybe once a week, or maybe parent schedule changes, or they have something else going on. But through all grade levels, we're probably 20 to 30 who are actually utilizing the school bus for their transportation to school.
Yeah, Patrick, that was one of the questions that was one of the attendees had put on there, in addition to the numbers, wanting to know if any kids not picked up or able to be picked up in Munds Park, but yet having school going on in Flagstaff.
So us not being able to get to them, that's the question. How many we might not
Correct. Yeah, not being able to pick up the students in Munds Park, and yet school was still in progress in Flagstaff.
I don't know that I can give you a number on how many don't show up when we do the alternate stops. Again, that's going to be affected by whose parents are home, who's able to get a ride down to the post office in the morning, and whether or not we do an alternate schedule. So the alternate schedule, we're delayed by 2 hours. That gives more time for the plows to be out, for the cinder trucks to be out. And then we do make every effort to get to the regular stops during those times when we do the delay.
Okay, do we have any?
Go ahead. I just wanted to add that there is a whole system that is set up here whereby on snow days at 5:30 in the morning, there is a call that involves the weather service, the school district, City of Flagstaff, the county, the sheriff's office, police department, fire department, and really the driver around how, frankly, everybody else then sets their day is the school district. So they're out front. I mean, and they will get information from us. There's also many times communication. If we're out, we have supervisors out 24 hours a day, so, monitoring the roads and kind of directing our traffic, so to speak, depending upon snowfall, but obviously varies area to area. So for any given storm. And so that information all feeds back in. We get on the phone at 5:30 in the morning. At that point, FUSD has made a decision. Are they going to have a delayed start? Are they going to close for the day? Or is it normal operations? And then based on that, the city and county, NAU, CCC, all the partners that are on that call kind of make their decisions then about what they're going to do in terms of their operations. And that's also driven by statutes. The county has specific statutes in terms of certain operations that have to be open, 24 hours a day. So, or excuse me, have to be open on a daily basis. So anyway, that is part of that process, but really it's FUSD that leads that process. And in that sense of determining what's going to happen, and working together. I mean, we communicate pretty regularly about what are the conditions of roads. Are there issues in Kachina? Are there slide offs? Or the other areas like Munds Park where there are hills. And we are excited about getting this alternative location constructed. It's going to construction shortly for Kachina, which could potentially service Munds Park too if it were hit hard. So we're excited about getting that into place as a safer alternative for that area. Thank you.
And Tom, if I could,
Yes.
real quick, I just want to remind the attendees that there is an option to ask questions down at the bottom. If you click on Q&A, you can submit a question, and we'll do our best to get to them.
Yeah, that's where I was looking at the questions, and I think we just answered the three of them the last three that I saw, trying to follow that. Appreciate that, Jeremy. Okay, before we introduce Tim Nowakowski, let me ask, were there any other questions then for Patrick Fleming? Okay, then I also have for today, Carl Fuller, who's with the Coconino County Public Works and responsible for staging the equipment when we expect snow events. So Carl, you want to share with the team your activities?
Well, sure. Yeah, of course, what we're talking about here, is graders, which are slow-moving machines. So, of course, staging them is kind of important to stage them close to where the work activity is. We do have, graders in the area that go on routes, so they go a little distance and they're plowing as they go. It's just more efficient to have them in, for example, a barn is the ideal condition to where they're ready to go. We only run like I think it's 2 graders 24 hours a day. All the rest of them are just from like a 4 a.m. shift to 4 p.m. And that's one of the things we have with school buses, for example. We watch real close what they're going to do on delaying, really helps us a lot to get some of these bus routes open, because a lot of our graders do actually take care of the bus routes. Of course, if they cancel a school for the day, we might even alter the route and say you don't have to worry about the bus route, cleaning out the turnarounds or anything like that till later, and they can move on and make progress in other areas, because in some areas we'll leave graders close to where the school bus is running during that time to make sure they pick up. The other thing about that 4 a.m. is we got to get them home in the evening too. So the same operator has to work usually till 4, maybe even 6 o'clock in the evening, pretty long day sometimes, to make sure everything is safe for the day if it's kept snowing. And as people have mentioned watching snow, it might start, we run 24 hours. We bring in new supervisors at midnight, and essentially they're watching weather from then on and trying to help these predictions. And we know the school's out like at 2 before they make their decision. Sometimes it is 6 o'clock in the morning or 5:30 during that call before the decision is made. However, if you start watching weather at 2 o'clock in the morning, but 2 o'clock in the afternoon, 12 hours later, that weather report is no good. That's old news then, and weather does change sometimes in the afternoon. So we have to prepare and like I say, stage our equipment and stage our work schedules to cover that. So we can't, for example, say, well, we're going to bring in all of our grader operators at midnight. That means they got to go home at noon. We're unexposed from noon on. We don't have, we don't run 24 hours. So that's the one thing to keep in mind of that 4 a.m. time is what works for us. The staging of graders, again, as I said, having them ready to go, heated and warm in a warm barn at 4 in the morning, where the operator can get right to them fairly quickly there, minimal checkout, startup time, and roll. That's the most efficient. And even where we park at Little Antelope, we do have a plug-in where it'll block heater, so they do melt down, but they are covered with snow, and that's got to be cleared off. Just that few miles on the highway, it causes some issues. It causes some safety issues, but primarily what it is because the state uses a lot of salt, a lot of that pavement's clear. These graders, we can't run chains at a high speed, so these graders are chained up, so they're going to go kind of slow, and that's where the delay of even that few miles, can be, say, an average of 10 minutes difference. Just that travel time, not to mention the sweeping off the grader and all that. So that's the convenience of having the barn actually attached to a subdivision. In most areas, not all areas, but in most areas, we are attached to a subdivision. We try and keep all of our graders off the highway. We did have an incident a few years ago where a car rear-ended one of our graders. Like I say, we're going slow even at top speed, maybe 15 miles an hour. But then when the state's putting salt on the road, the cars tend to pick up their speed doing 60, 70 miles an hour or more again. And we did have one incident a few years ago. It doesn't hurt our grader, but that takes that grader out of commission for the investigation of that. The loser in that is that little car that just hit a 30,000-pound grader. That's the dangerous part. And so, there's that risk there. ADOT, I know you could probably talk to some of them. They run the highway with their trucks, even slow speeds and a lot of lights on them, and they still have an incident of a car. They even have the warnings because usually they're plowing at slower speeds than what some of the cars are going. So there's a certain amount of risk.
Carl, let me interject here because
Sure.
question come in wanting to know how you're currently staging equipment for a anticipation of a snowstorm.
Yeah. Okay, so currently that's what we're doing. We're parking 2 graders at the Little Antelope Yard to cover Pinewood. One of them, we split the areas essentially north and south, and they do that from 4 a.m. However, we do have a 24-hour truck that runs in Pinewood as well, and it'll do Pinewood Boulevard. It will do some of the main roads such as Oak and all that, and it's also the cinder truck. So what it does is starts out at Sheep Hill at say noon. We run those noon to midnight, so depending on where it's at, around noon or midnight, it has gone back to Sheep Hill for about an hour to exchange drivers, to refuel, and that kind of thing. We do have cinders. We generally only need 1 load per shift on cinders. However, if we do run out of cinders on a certain icy storm where we need more, they have to leave that area. We do have some backup cinders at Little Antelope. We've gotten occasionally, but otherwise it's going back to the Fort Tuthill interchange to reload cinders there. So it could be gone as much as an hour at any time just to reload. But generally, yeah, we do try and keep something in there 24 hours, but you got at least an hour or so around midnight, maybe a little more than that, where there's nothing. And usually around noon, there is no cinders during that time. But the graders are generally in that area. So.
This is Gail. If the barn were there, then the drivers would be able to change drivers right there in Munds Park at the barn and get more cinders there, or how exactly would that work?
Yeah, the cinders won't happen. We won't put cinders in there. There's not enough use. The only way we would change drivers in Munds Park is if we had an operator that lives there in that area. And currently we don't. So they've got to come out anyway. I think the closest place we have operators that we can exchange is at Kachina, which isn't all that far away. We have before in the field, if we're having trouble in an area, like for example, a supervisor may deliver an operator to a truck in the field and change out there. But we also have a fuel issue when we do that. Like I say, usually if you run these trucks 12 hours, they need refueled. We don't have fuel and everything. Plus the graders are, they come down in a pickup. They need their fuel for their refueling too. So that's one of the reasons they come back. But that's pretty minimal issue. I've never really seen any problems running that truck back and exchanging out. That one fluke storm once in a while we have that we hate to take that truck out of there, or shutdowns on the highway delay that truck. But usually, for example, it may not be the very same truck coming back. If we have to, if a truck gets held up in traffic when he's leaving at the end of his shift, coming back to that, we'll alter our trucks around and send a different truck down there to work. It's the same type of truck with a fresh operator while we're getting that one guy cleared out of traffic.
I have a question. I'm Kat.
Hi.
Hi. I really appreciate y'all coming and talking about this and being so honest, with the risk and benefits and everything. I, I haven't really heard anything so far that screams life or death situation or, huge amounts of time saved. I love the fact that Kachina Village is a good alternative, possibly. But just based on something you said, Josh, earlier, I'm just kind of curious. We used to have equipment, you said, near the fire station, and we made it a skate park, which I've never seen anybody do that there, but maybe. Um, and I'm just wondering if it's that important that we have something there, which I don't disagree. We should have something close to Munds Park, or even in, as long as it's not near, huge residential areas or in the forest. But if that is something that's so important, it would be so helpful to the fire department or, or anything. Why don't we just take that skate park area that we're talking about and just put a barn there and cover it up, and that way you get, Carl, what you want is the cover, over your equipment, and Josh has what he needs to be able to help with plowing the streets.
So I'll take that one. That location is private property. That is the country club's property. And I imagine it's worth a pretty penny right now. And I don't think that the club would be willing just to give it away. If that makes sense.
Okay.
Yeah, it's privately held property.
Okay, so they bought it from y'all when
No, we never owned it. They've always owned it. We just used it for a while. They let the county use it for a while. And then at some point they decided they wanted it back and turned it into a skate park.
Oh, okay. Well, again, Kachina Village, like you said, Carl, is not that far. Maybe that's a good alternative for us.
Well, the Kachina Village works for the truck, but not for the graders. We can't run a grader that far. If we aren't able to, secure property attached to Munds Park, which would be the ideal in that area, our next location would be the Little Antelope Yard in that area. We would be looking, and we would just have to deal with the highway situation. But we, of course, we're going to exhaust everything. In all honesty, the county's been looking for a barn location in Munds Park for over 25 years that I've known, and it's just a difficult area. There isn't much choice there, so that's why we're here.
Yeah, and I think it's important again to understand there are the 10-wheel trucks that plow and bring cinders, and then there are the graders, and the graders are much more efficient in terms of plowing snow, right? They're big, they can do a couple passes. I mean, they're very much more efficient, so we typically use those on the higher volume roads, to try to get those roads cleared as quickly as we can, again working our way into the development. And again, that's really to support the emergency response. When we get done with this piece, I'll come back and talk again. And I think, Kat, nobody's here saying that we've got this huge crisis and we've got to have this barn immediately.
Yeah.
This was, frankly, a low priority in the prioritization of the things that we need to invest in as a department in a county. This is a very low priority project for the very reasons you're hearing, that there isn't a great deal of additional time gained. I mean, sometimes it could be more or less. There can be incidences, as Josh mentioned, or incidences on the freeway that can affect service. But you all have said, and I appreciate, this has been great to get the feedback on the service, that you're pretty happy with the service today. And I think right now we've had a good relationship working with Josh and the district and with the the school district. I mean, I think we've got a pretty effective operation there. And so would it be enhanced if we could put in a barn and store the graders in the area? It would be enhanced. It would give us a little bit more confidence in terms of the service, less impact to the equipment over the long term in terms of degradation, rust, et cetera, and those types of impacts. But there is no crisis here. It's not, Josh he didn't say, yeah, we have 10 problems every winter and, we're losing people, we got to get this done. We got to have something happen here. So there is no crisis. I mean, and that we've never said there was a crisis. This is something we like to do. I would not classify this as something that we absolutely have to do. And that's why I've been really clear that we can push this off, and we have pushed this off for financial reasons, and because it is not a priority right now. We got much bigger priorities that we need to be focused on right now. So, but that doesn't mean that we still don't want the community's input as to potential future locations, and hear that input and take that into consideration when this comes back on the landscape, probably 5-6 years from now. So thank
Awesome.
you.
Thank you.
Lucinda, it's timely here. I know we got to a 10-minute delay on the start, but I want to try to keep us as close to the hour as we can. Before we introduce Tim, wanted to have Lucinda speak to the different issues here, particularly for there's multiple emails that we've received, which are beyond the scope of our charter. And I'd like to, since we have Lucinda here with us, to go ahead and talk or address the various emails and questions that we received from the community, if you would.
Well, I know that we're going to get into, we'll see. I think first that my understanding of the process that the committee's laid out here, and Tom, you correct me if I'm wrong, but I think today was really focused on, what is the level of need, and people really understanding where are we in terms of the level of need. And so, my understanding is today there's going to be a vote, is there really the need to take this to the next step, which is to get input on a location. And that's this committee's decision whether to do that or not. If you vote that yes, we still want to have that conversation, and we want to provide that input to the county, or we're going to say, or the contrary is there isn't a need, the county's agreed not to do anything for 5 years, and we're going to bring this back up. If it comes back up in 5 years, we'll have another conversation. But if we're going to talk about locations, I think then we will take those locations for that next conversation and provide our perspective about those potential locations that had been identified. We did have a number of emails that came in that people were pushing a specific location, where the Woody's gas station used to be, or behind that. And I will say that there was I would classify it as an informal proposal had been presented to the county or offered up to the county, again, informally. And, to be honest, it was 2 to 3 times what it would have cost us to, even at our rough conceptual estimate, which was high. And so, that's a non-starter. I mean, we're not going down this path right now, but at that cost, we would not go down that path in the future. We just never could justify that level of cost for that location. So, I mean, we're really, to find a location, we need a location where basically, somebody donates the land and takes it, they can take it as a tax deduction, or decides to lease it at $1 a year or something that's low cost. Because, the cost equation, again, back to the cost benefit, as I mentioned, this isn't a crisis. And so in terms of the cost benefit here, we could never afford to pay millions, over some time frame. So So that the number of emails came into that pushing for that specific location. And certainly we want to hear if people like that location, that's great. But I can just tell you that there's definitely, the cost would be a major issue there. So.
I have a real quick question for the group, and I think Lucinda's already answered it kind of indirectly, but I think it's important for everyone to know if this is in fact the case or not. But with regards to the fire department response or sheriff response or snow removal response, are there any federal or state or even local Coconino County requirements that are not being met currently? In other words, is there anything on the state or federal level that says you must have this X amount of response time? Or is there anything at the county level that says, yes, our criteria is all streets should have snow removed within 30 minutes? So just the question is, and it doesn't have to be answered right now, is there any criteria out there that's not currently being met?
In terms of the county, no, there is not. I mean, we have goals and objectives that we, obviously we attempt to attain for any given area. But as everybody knows, the dynamics with snow, is it freezing? Is it not freezing? It varies so greatly. There really isn't any national standards or anything. And then our dynamic is so different because we've got dirt roads. We've got steep terrain in some areas. It just varies so much. You can't say, well, plowing on flat ground out in Doney Park is one thing versus plowing in Kachina Village or Munds Park is a very different thing.
Are there any of your own internal goals that are not being met? Because we keep hearing that the equipment barn would be a nice to have, that it will save us 10 minutes and we'll have warm equipment. I get all that. That's great. But I think overall in most areas, the vast majority areas, people's perception of our snow service is pretty consistent with what yours is. That, we do like at 90% of the time we do a great job. 10% of the time you get some really bad back-to-back storms or really bad icing, and then people will get frustrated, and it's just hard. We can't get cinders down fast enough, and because of that, icing really can be a big issue. And so no, I mean, there is no crisis. We had a crisis a few years ago when we were in the last Great Recession and we weren't able to fill positions. I mean, for us, it's bodies in, we have 27 graders. There needs to be 27 graders on the road when it's snowing. And then the trucks, everybody needs to be in a truck, and supervisors will get in a truck. Somebody calls in sick or something. I mean, we have a fabulous crew. I worked for a utility, big utility, before I came to work for the county. And I can tell you, getting people out we were in a union environment there, and getting people out to work, in these kinds of conditions and stuff, it was tough, and you're begging. And these people, they know what their job is. They're professional. They show up and they do their job. And we have virtually no issues with no shows. I mean, I can't even remember when we've had a no show. I remember a time we've even had a no show. So it's all about people. It's taking care of people. And part of this barn is taking care of the people that take care of you. Because having equipment that they can get in and move forward with and don't have to get their hands all wet and get soaking wet before they get in the grader, those are the kinds of things I think about. Because when you're out there for 12 hours, and wet and cold, it's not a fun job. It's a tough job, so we have an incredible team, and I think they do a great job. We don't have any of these issues. We have schedules, people show up. So no, Walt, there isn't, some major issue with meeting goals. Overall, since we came through that period with the Great Recession, we've had very good feedback in terms of our service. So thank you. Yes, I think you guys do a great job.
Thank you.
I have a question for Carl. there have been times when the equipment in Munds Park has broke down and there have been delays on the snow removal. So the question is, currently, how do you repair that equipment during the snowstorm, and how would the barn benefit you for having a place to repair the equipment when it breaks down?
Well, the barn would certainly help, but you never know what the breakdown is. Sometimes they do break down in the road and they're just stuck there till they're repaired. And that means the mechanic has to come out of the Sheep Hill Yard Flagstaff down there to do the repair and get to it. You do have things that go down that they do need to do where the barn's beneficial, such as you change out cutting edges. You know, that's a wear part on that moldboard when you're plowing, they do wear out. Having a barn where they can kind of dry it out and do that, that's a big benefit. A flat tire or something like that, well, like say a flat tire on the road, it has to be changed right there. And there is a time delay when that happens. You know, we certainly won't have enough mechanics that we can put at every barn around the county. So they do have to come from a central shop. So there is some travel time always involved in that, but they do have service trucks and they're all-wheel drive service trucks, so they can usually respond pretty fast. But breakdowns do happen. Out of those graders, Lucinda actually mentioned, it's actually we do have 27. We have actually 25 in service. There are 2 that go into rotation. You can expect 10% are going to be down for something at any given time. So we do generally have one that we could exchange out if it's a major down, like if a grader goes down a transmission that has to be, you know, taken into the major shop. We usually are able to cover that. And then we also have backup rental equipment if we have to. Of course, those take a long time to get. We generally, because we keep a lot of graders, Munds Park, Kachina area, you know, even the Mormon Lake area and places like that, there's a lot of graders. We generally keep one central, such as Kachina, where we keep a backup grader in case one goes down, and we'll move it to that area. But we have had our outer lying areas, like for example, Forest Lake's a grader problem, where we had to send one of those graders down there one year. And when you do that, you can't transport during major storm events. So they have to be within a reasonable distance where you can actually drive them. You know, for a grader to leave Kachina to get down to Pinewood, just to drive it, you know, is well over an hour trip. And then of course you got to get that operator moved to go do that. So you can have those delays. They don't happen, you know, we got pretty good equipment. They don't happen often, but it's equipment. They do happen. It does happen.
Okay, if I can move this along, because I'm not time here. I did have one more item here on the agenda, just to answer some of the questions that the community have posed relative to traffic data, particularly if there was a barn in the area. The concern was additional traffic. And so just to understand what the impacts of traffic with an equipment barn in the area, I've asked Tim Delegowski, who's the county transportation planner, to give us a quick update on the volumes that we would be talking about. Tim?
Thank you, Tom. I'm Tim Delegowski. I'm the transportation planner for Public Works. And I've been brought into this conversation to, as Tom said, kind of clarify some of the questions or answer some of the questions about the traffic volumes that would be generated from the equipment barn. Now, the conversation has been pretty much focused on winter snow removal, but want to keep in mind that there's also some summer operations that Public Works does in the Munds Park area, and that involves some road graders also, and that involves ditch maintenance to keep our drainage ditches clean and flowing as needed. And then there's also some dirt roads in the area where we need to regrade on a regular basis. So I was brought into this conversation to kind of evaluate what happens in the wintertime versus the summertime regarding the traffic volumes. So in kind of just following up on the conversation for winter operations, of course, we have a lot of snow plowing out there, but also included in our wintertime operations are some crack filling activities that occur in the fall and possibly in the spring, depending upon the need. So I got with Carl Fuller, who spoke earlier, and he shed some light on the number of trips that are made every year to Munds Park to clear the snow from the roads out there. And going back in our records, we did some averaging, and the total number of trips that we have every time we get a snowstorm is we have about 8 trips per shift. Now that involves someone coming out in a pickup, the operator getting out, getting into the equipment goes out, it comes back after the shift is done, gets back in his truck and he leaves, taking into account all of those kinds of trips that are associated with a snowstorm. And it turns out that we have about 8 trips per shift with 2 shifts per day, and approximately on average about 3 of those days per storm. So we have about 48 trips coming out from the Flagstaff shop to Munds Park every year or per storm. So when we started looking at the number of storms that we get per year, we average about 10 storms per year. And so that means that if you had about 48 trips per storm and 10 storms per year, you have about 480 trips per year for just snow removal. It sounds like a lot, but when you break it down by day, it doesn't really add up to a lot. But then to add to those 480 trips per year for snow removal, we looked at the crack filling activities. And once again, we have about 8 trips, same number of people going out, getting into the equipment, going around doing their activities. But they only have 1 shift per day instead of 2 shifts per day. And they only work 3 days per week and only 3 weeks per year to accomplish that. So when you multiply all of that out for the crack filling activities that occur out there in Munds Park, it equates to about 120 trips per year from the Flagstaff facility. So if we take the 480 trips and add for snow removal, and we add to that the 120 trips per year for the crack filling, it comes out to 600 trips per year. But the winter activities are only going on for 6 months out of the year, and I'll get to the summer activities later. But so we have about 600 trips per year for our winter activities. And typically we work out there during the winter about 20 days per month. And so that turns out to be about 5 trips per day on average that the equipment needs to be out there and running. And so if the equipment barn were to be placed in Munds Park during the winter time, you would see an average of about 5.5 trips per day, 5.5 trips per day in and out of that equipment barn. Now that refers to work days because they typically don't work on weekends unless we have a bad storm. But on average, winter operations generate about 5.5 trips per day. And that would be the traffic effect on Munds Park. Now, we also need to note that during the winter, that's when the population of Munds Park declines significantly. And so there's fewer trips from the residences during those times. And so the effect of the equipment barn and the number of trips generated by that wouldn't be felt very significantly. Now, going to the summer operations, we have some drainage maintenance, the ditches that I was talking about, and some roads that need to be graded. So going back and looking at our historical data for that, and I won't run you through all of the number of trips per shift and the number of shifts per day and the number of days per week. I'll just give you the totals so that you can digest that. The total number of trips per year for drainage maintenance, and that's grading the ditches and things like that, cleaning out the culverts and stuff, is about 128 trips per year. Now, when we add to that the resurfacing and grading activities, those turn out to be about 32 trips per year. So during the summertime, we add the 128 to the 32, and we get about 160 trips per year in and out of Munds Park there, which would be reflective of what would be happening at the equipment barn. Those 160 trips per year, of course, that's only during the summer. And so when you calculate that out for the summer activities, it comes out to about 1.84, and I could just round that up to 2 trips per day average coming out of the equipment barn to do summertime activities. So, but that's when we have the highest number of people living in Munds Park. And so because the population increases during the summer, and because of the type of operations that we are conducting out there during the summer, the effect of 2 trips per day doesn't really have much of an effect. But I would like to give this a little bit of perspective. The national average for a residence in a subdivision, the number of trips generated per day is about 10 trips per day, and that takes into account both parents leaving in the morning, going to work, coming home at lunch, going back, coming home in the evening, or if not both of those are going to work, maybe there's a child that goes to school, they drive to school. There's also trips to the grocery store, there's mail delivery, there's garbage pickup. All of those kinds of trips have been studied both nationally and at the state levels to come up with an average of each residence will generate on average about 10 trips per day. So when you compare the 10 trips per day that would be generated by an average resident in Munds Park, and you compare that to the 5.5 trips that we would generate during the winter, or the 1 or 2 trips that we would generate during the summer, you can see that the effect of the equipment barn traffic-wise is less than 1 single residence being added to Munds Park. Typically, now, I know there's questions about, well, 10 trips per day, does that apply to rural also? And it does, except that the number of trips go down just a little bit because you don't have as many garbage trucks, you don't have as much mail delivery, etc. But the trips generally never dip below 5 trips per day on average for a resident, even in a rural situation. So at the very bottom of the scale, at 5 trips per day, that's generally about the most trips per day that the equipment barn would generate. So that's just, I'm just trying to put this in perspective from a traffic perspective of what the effect of the equipment barn would have on the Munds Park community. And I'm happy to answer any questions.
Hi, Tim. It's Gail. So having the barn there and the equipment coming from the barn is not going to cause any more traffic on the roads. If the job needs to be done, it's going to be done regardless if it's parked there or if it has to come from Flagstaff, the wear and truck on the vehicles and the highways and the fuel and all that stuff.
Yes, that's correct, that the number of trips will remain the same, basically.
Okay. Thank you.
With the average of 10 storms per winter, what is the average snowfall per storm, and what is the average snowfall per year for Munds Park?
And that I do not have an answer for you. I would have to defer to someone else who has that information. My focus is traffic as opposed to weather.
And you probably get more accurate numbers from the Weather Service, but generally the general Flagstaff, Northern Arizona area receives about 87 inches per year on average. It's been higher in the past years. They got up over 100 inches average snowfall per year, which, you know, if you equate it to 10 storms, it's about 10 inches a storm. It's really a little less than that. It's probably about 8. The cycle of weather patterns, you can talk to the Weather Service, it's cycling back a little bit now. As you've seen these last few drier years, we're hitting somewhere around an average of upper 80s, 87, I think is what it's at now per year.
So 87 inches of snow per year?
Yes.
Well, that's a lot. So I can understand why we would need an equipment barn and snow removal in Munds Park.
Yes, that's a lot.
Well, and
It's,
I would add that historically we've seen greater amounts in that rim area. That's historically right, Carl. I mean that we would
yes,
that
the
area
rim
would
does.
get hit earlier and be hit longer and hit harder typically. Not every storm's the same. Some come in directly from the west or whatever, or from the north, but just the way the wind patterns are here, that is more typical.
Yeah, the rim communities do tend to get a little bit higher amounts. Also, just, even Flagstaff, just so you know, Flagstaff's the 10th snowiest city in the country. So this area, we do get heavy snow.
Okay, Tim, Carl, appreciate the input with this. I do want to make a comment just for the committee here so is aware. Tim Delegowski has been pretty instrumental in helping us get our speed awareness signs within the community. So he's been very active with us, and I just want to acknowledge his help within the community.
Thank you, Tom.
You're welcome. Now, if I can, I'd like to move along. And like I said, we've spent all this time trying to get information to help us in determining if we want to go forward with an equipment barn in the Munds Barn community that benefits the public safety and allows the operations of the county's public works to respond to the needs of the community. We should focus now on recommending, I believe we need to focus on recommending a potential site to the county as they have requested us to do with the charter of the committee. To do that, what I'd like to have us follow Robert Rules of Order, and that request a motion from the committee on whether moving forward or not moving forward on the equipment barn. And then, as I say, following Robert rules, we'll go through with a motion, a second, and then discussion.
Yeah, I motion to move forward, find a location for the barn.
I second that.
I second that also.
I second that too.
Wes, and then Gail second.
If you can second it.
Having given that for
I
like having discussion, or what discussions would you like to have about moving forward with our with the equipment barn?
You want
I
to
think
know?
definitely discussion of locations is what we need to have, and maybe that would be something just with the community members having our own meeting at times where we can all voice our opinions on where it should be if we do need it, and the different locations.
Let me just interject. What I was planning from our agenda standpoint was that now that we've gotten all this data, all this information, and now we have a motion to proceed forward with our charter of identifying potential equipment barn for Munds Park, that if we vote on going forward with that, then the expectation is at the next meeting, we would review all the various options that have come in to us at this point in time, both from committee members as well as from the community. And any of those that we received, we've already provided those to Public Works so that they can give us their perspective of the pros and cons with it. So that's kind of the plan going forward, provided that the team wants to continue on. Kat, you have your hand up there.
Yeah, the only thing I will say though is based on what Lucinda just told us, is that we can do that. We can present and we can all agree and maybe have a really happy ending with a location. However, it's not something that they even have on the books and on the budget for the next 5-6 years. So locations can change by then. So just know, and we can talk about it and we can say, this is a great place and we can bring this up in 5 or 6 years. But at that point, it may not be available. So we may have to go through this whole process again. So I'm just throwing that out because that's a probably reality.
No, that's fair. That's fair. When we started this out, it was, just the start of the COVID and moving forward. And since everything financially stuff has been pushed back, you're 100% correct, is that nothing's going to happen in 3 to 5 years, but trying to achieve our objective of the committee is at least recommending some potential ones as has been requested of us. That's what we're looking to do.
Yeah, I just want to make sure everyone understands this whole process may start up again based on, what happens in 5 or 6 years. So
I
Yeah,
agree.
absolutely, Kat. We will reinitiate a process then. And I think what's important now, though, to me, as much as important to talk about location, is what are the principles that are important to people. And that, the initial discussion with Supervisor Ryan about setting up this group was to have people articulate the principles by which they want a decision made. So not only to just look at location, but to talk about the principles that underlie good or bad aspects of a location would be really helpful for us. Thank you.
Well, when this comes back around in, say, 3 to 5 years, will the county notify all property owners in Munds Park of their intent to build a barn rather than just a handful of people getting a notice?
I mean, that would be the full intent. We had been communicating through certain vehicles, which obviously had not reached everyone. And again, we were going slow on this process because of the priority, and situation. And, as I've said before, we did not communicate that. Where the communication breakdown came was that, the Forest Service got out their notification. We should have been jointly communicating with.
I think we lost her.
Yeah, I think we lost you there.
Lost you, Lucinda.
Another earthquake.
Okay. Sandy, you had your hand up there?
Yes, I did. And I forgot.
Oh, okay. We understand that one. Yeah. Okay, if no other comments, then what I'd like to do is see if I can restate the motion that an equipment barn within Munds Park community that benefits the public safety and allows operations of the county work will focus on recommending a potential site for the equipment barn. With that, I'd like to have a voice vote, if I can go down, of proceeding along with that charter. And I'll just call off the names here and just tell me yay or nay with it. Bud Alter.
Nay. Nay.
Nay. Scott Bowen.
Yes.
Walt Radinsky.
Nay.
Sandy Cavinas.
Yes.
Wes Deem.
Yes.
Dick Drennan. I still show you on mute there, Dick.
Where is he?
Okay, I'll come back to Dick there. I have myself, yes. Sharon Emery.
Yes. Can you hear
Sharon says yes. Joel Holcomb? I guess I lost Joe. Kat Klein?
No.
Roy Leventa is not here. Gail Van Derzen?
Yes.
Everett?
Yes.
I don't have Dick Drennan. Dick, you still haven't come across for us. There we go.
Oh, now I'm on. I was muted.
Yes,
Now
I
I'm
know.
unmuted. So I vote yes.
Okay, so I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 yeses. 1, 2, 3 noes. So I guess the yeses have it. We will proceed on with our discussion.
Just note that the 3 no's are part-time residents.
What does that matter, Wes?
A lot.
Oh, it does.
Doesn't
in
matter
what
at all.
regards?
No, Wes, that has nothing to do with it. We own
Well, that's what,
there, and I'm there all winter, so no, it does not matter.
Sure it does.
I'm trying to see where this is even relevant.
We're gonna proceed forward here with it. So the next meeting, propose that, as I said, there have been several locations submitted, which have been submitted to Public Works for their doing the assessment of those. And so what we'll do is we'll share all those various locations and along with the pros and cons with it, get that out before the next meeting. Now we'll look at if there's, in addition to those, we need to have any other suggested location presented to us. So I say it both from the committee as well as from the community. It can be private partials on the forest. I mean, you know, we want to get everyone's input on it so that we can go through. But we also need to identify how to evaluate those locations based on location, proximity, construction, the costs, impacts to the neighborhood, and then any other criteria items that we have. So just for timing here, be thinking of those so that we can bring those forward in the next meeting. And again, my idea is understanding the criteria that we're going to use. We understand the locations that have been submitted, and then be able to rank those. And who knows, there may be more than one, and maybe we prioritize location 1, location 2, location 3, different ideas for it. And
Tom, this is Everett. Just the county obviously did a study. Can we get a copy of the county when they evaluated the different sites? It might be a good place for us to start looking at what they were looking at and then add to it or take away from it.
I will follow up with the county on that just to get, because I agree in the sense I'd like to see, okay, here's the pros and cons for each of these solutions, and with that documentation provided to us, so as we have our discussion, at least dealing with their perspective as well.
Yeah, not necessarily why they made the decisions. We don't need to know that. Well, it might be good to know that, but just what they were using to make judgments.
Okay, that's fair.
Yep, I agree. That would be an awesome tool to have.
Okay. Okay, now for the recommending these other potential locations, I'd like to have us set the deadline that we receive this information by October 31st. And the importance of that is that we have a cutoff for this point in time of the possible locations, so that yes, the county can assess them. We have a chance of looking at them as well for our next meeting. In addition, we had the NBC Properties provided information to the county, all the financials and stuff, which we haven't seen. And they have asked that information not be shared until we have a closeout of the different potential sites. Because you don't want, it's not fair to some people to be coming in and making another proposal having known the information of the other folks. So any questions or further comments towards on how we move forward?
Actually, I do have a comment, and it
Yes,
might
sir.
also help explain my no for the motion. There's a couple things about the motion that I had an issue with. One is when you said the community of Munds Park. I don't know if that's defined well enough for people to fully understand. Are we talking about both sides of the freeway? Are we talking about what is the limits of the area that we're calling the community of Munds Park? That's number one. Number two, because there might be locations out there that are ideal that are not known to us yet,
yes,
maybe it would be easier for the committee to say, yes, we support an equipment barn, but we should develop criteria for the non-placement of it. In other words, it might be easier to pick where we don't want it versus where we do want it. That way, we'll have a better idea if a location comes along, if it's on our no list, then we can say, well, thank you, but that's not going to work. Or yes, that works, that fits our criteria. So in other words, maybe we develop criteria about placement. For example, that it does not directly impact any one residence or any one property owner, that it not be in the forest, if that's where we go. I'm just saying it might be easier to develop no criteria versus yes criteria. That's all.
Well, and I don't disagree with you, Walt. What I was trying to say is we need to identify what that criteria is, and it can be a yes or it can be a no. Like you're saying, not next to a resident. I think all those should be considered when we look at criteria. Okay, again, I apologize. We have gone over again, hour and a half, but our next meeting will be November 11th at 10 a.m. And I'll try to be a little more disciplined here and keeping us on track. Okay. Again, thank you, everyone. We'll get the notes together, summarizing our meeting today and getting it out to you as soon as we can. Thank you again for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you. Have a good day.
You too now.
Thank you, Tom.